Hey y'all, my name is Mr. Chao and welcome to Chao Time. I'm back with the second in my 4-part mini-series on chronographs. Last video was on the Sugess Mechanical Chronograph. This, the second most expensive watch, or the second cheapest watch, I guess, is this, the Bulova Lunar Pilot. This watch has been in my collection now for about 4 months, so I've had quite a bit of time with it, and I feel pretty confident now reviewing it. If you don't know, I have to buy and sell watches to do these reviews, so you'll find in the description below my Instagram page. I don't think there's anything on there right now if you're watching this pretty soon after the video is published, because I have to go back to the US to buy and sell watches, but keep your eye out there if you're interested in any of the pieces that I buy. The way I review watches is by objectively scoring them against the rubric in several categories to get a total score. I then take that total score and I apply a value multiplier based on the price to kind of even out the playing field amongst different price range watches. I then give a completely subjective review, I guess, of my personal thoughts and whether the watch is going to stay in my collection. Before we begin, I always like to look at the purpose and context of the watch in order to understand it as we look at the rubric. This watch was it is a reissue of a prototype watch that once went to the moon, so it's very vintage inspired, and it's a kind of a tool chronograph watch. All right, let's get to it. We'll start with the feel, function, and visual appeal of the case and bracelet. The stainless steel tonneau shaped 45mm case probably sits pretty large on most wrists, but at least the case is well rounded. There are very few straight lines or edges. It has a satiny fine bead blast finish on the mid-case that seems pretty resistant to scratches and scuffs. The bezel is a separate piece, which probably saves on cost, but makes it look a little cheap as well. The bezel does have a hard edge on top, as does the flat sapphire crystal on top of that, which gives it kind of a stair-step look. Neither of these design decisions mesh well with the shapes and textures of the case. The bezel is brushed though, which adds some visual interest. The chronograph pushers are polished and return to the design cues of the mid-case. They have soft curves and rounded edges. These are polished. They depress almost all the way before an almost completely silent click. The reset pusher has a much more distinct actuation point, being both audible and tactile. The oversized crown is ribbed and very easy to manipulate. Being a quartz movement though, you'll rarely have the need to pull it out. Each of its positions, used to set the watch, clearly register through the fingers, and it spins effortlessly. It has a polished dome with the Bulova tuning fork logo embossed on top. Turning the case over reveals a case back with some text for historical context. Here you find the level of water resistance, which is 50 meters. Obviously more than enough for washing hands and rainy days, but I never feel safe about these things without a screw down crown. The back edges of the case have the sharpest edges on the mid case, but they never seem to dig into my skin. From here, you can see the solid end links and a 3-link bracelet. As with most watches, the links only pivot at the bottom of each link. It's brushed on both the tops and sides. The bracelet terminates with a butterfly deployant clasp with 2 spring-loaded pushers. The last link also has an engraved Bulova logo. There are no half links or any way of adjusting the bracelet other than a full link at a time. All the parts are milled though. 5 out of 10 for form, 7.5 out of 10 for function. Let's move on to that chronograph dial. The black and white dial is legible and simple. None of the various elements overlap or feel cluttered. The subdials are recessed, while the indices are applied. These two components contribute to a dial with a lot of depth. The indices are sandblasted, just like the case, and are lume filled. The lume burns a pleasant light blue and is bright enough, but only lasts for about 2 hours before becoming useless. The 3 o'clock subdial is a 1/10 of a second counter, while the 9 o'clock subdial is a 60-minute totalizer. The texture on these subdials are radial concentric rings, which is also used for the second track along the outside of the dial. It is also recessed like a little moat. Outboard of this is a tachometer scale. The main dial is textured like a fancy eggshell business card. Everything other than the applied indices are painted on. The quality of the text is pretty good. There are no glaring mistakes, but the paint could be thicker. The sword hands and diamond-shaped second hand are painted a glossy white, which, as mentioned earlier, makes legibility a breeze. Unfortunately, there are some flaws on the hands when you zoom in. The simple two-tone dial is such a classic design. Finally, there is a date window at 4:30. It matches the dial and helps the date disappear, which contributes to the simplicity of a dial with so many elements. 7 out of 10 for form, 6 out of 10 for function. Let's move on to that quartz movement. The movement in this watch is the quartz caliber 8136. It's part of Bulova's precisionist line, which means that the quartz crystal vibrates at a rate of 262,144 cycles per second. This makes it much more accurate than virtually any other quartz movement on the market. It's rated at plus or minus 10 seconds per year. This particular sample, in the 4 months that I've had the watch, is still accurate within 2 or 3 seconds. The second hand ticks twice per second, but the chronograph second hand is almost a smooth sweep, looking just like the sweep on a typical ETA movement. The 1/10 of a second counter is sweeping so fast that it's basically a smooth sweep. The movement itself is basically undecorated. 6.5 points for both form and function. That gives us a total in the objective categories of 38.5 out of 60. So let's move on to the most subjective of these categories, the brand's heritage and prestige. Bulova was founded in 1875 by Joseph Bulova. It was later reincorporated under the name Bulova Watch Company in 1923, and most recently was purchased by Citizen in 2008. Bulova's claim to fame is probably their Accutron watch technology, which used a tuning fork to regulate a timekeeping element. This tuning fork is now the logo for Bulova. Accutron was guaranteed to be accurate to 1 minute per month or 2 seconds per day, which in 1960 was leagues better than their mechanical competition. More recently, Bulova developed the precisionist movement. It allows Bulova to be a cheaper alternative to the spring drive smooth sweep experience. Enthusiasts seem to generally ignore the brand, but hobbyists seem to enjoy them. The Lunar Pilot is probably their most visible watch for the enthusiast, giving the brand a 4 out of 10 for heritage and prestige, and a total score of 42.5 out of 70. A new Lunar Pilot on a bracelet can be found online for about $450, but used ones come up on forums and other places often enough for around $350 for a near new example, which gives the watch a value multiplier of 1.718, bringing the value score up to 74.916, placing the watch in a respectable 21st in total score and quite high on the value list at number 4. So, onto my personal opinion on this watch. It's been said to death, but 45 millimeters for this watch is quite large, especially on my 16.5 centimeter wrist. The watch also doesn't have any micro adjust, at least this stock bracelet does not. I've thought about putting it onto a NATO or a black leather strap, and that might help it feel a little bit better, but right now it doesn't, this particular bracelet doesn't fit me, you know, like the one link difference, it's either too big or too small. I also don't really like the finishing on the watch. I don't think it looks very nice from a lot of different light situations, and this bracelet doesn't really integrate with the finishing on the case very well. I don't like the pushers. I think they stick out a little bit too much compared to the original prototype Bulova that went to the moon. The loom is quite disappointing. It looks really nice when it's fully charged and for the first couple of hours of the night, but it quickly becomes basically non-visible, which for me is annoying when I wake up in the middle of the night and I check my watch. However, I do really like the design of the dial and how it's executed. Basically everything about it, the shape of the hands, the color, just the black and white, it's really classic looking. Everything is really clean. There's no extraneous text. And I really like the applied indices. I think they look really nice also, just in combination with all the other elements. It's also kind of refreshing to have a quartz watch in my collection, something that when I pick up, I don't have to set. This is the only quartz watch other than like my sports watch, the watch I wear to go riding my bike or running or something like that. And I do have a G-Shock, but I actually don't even know where it is anymore. It's I'm sure it's somewhere in a cabinet or a drawer somewhere, but I honestly don't even know where it is anymore. So this is the only quartz watch that I really wear on a regular basis, and I really love the accuracy of it for one, but also the simplicity of just being able to pick it up and put it on. For me, the watch is 99% of the way there to something that is a keeper in my collection. It is great value. It has a really nice design in terms of the dial, and I like the case too. I wish it was a little bit nicer, I guess, but I don't think I'll be keeping this watch. But I'm not really sure yet. I think by the time I make my state of the collection video at the end of the year, I will have solidified my opinion. But for now, I'm pretty sure it will not be sticking around. So, is there anything about the way that I reviewed the watch or scored the watch that you don't agree with? Or is there anything that you would like for me to review in the future? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for making it to the end. Hope you enjoyed the video. See y'all.